Good morning, everyone. We're just admitting everyone to this presentation and giving it another minute so that we make sure everyone can join. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Maybe it's afternoon where you are. It's morning where a lot of us are. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're very excited this morning. We've got a great speaker. Just another minute here, and then we're going to get started. Good morning. Yeah, so Monica just said good morning to everyone. As a reminder, you can use the chat. I'll get to that in just a second. Good morning, Carrie. Thanks for being here. Good morning, Kim. All right. All right, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna get started. And Chris, if you don't mind, Chris and or Heather, if you don't mind admitting our stragglers while I begin to chat and introduce Scott. So welcome everybody. If this is your first presentation to the 2025 Wild Horse Advocacy Summit, welcome or welcome back. We're putting the A in advocacy. This whole virtual summit is to arm yourself with knowledge to effectively advocate for wild horses and or the issues that you care about in 2025. This morning, we are excited to have Scott Beckstead with us. Scott is with the Wild Horse Refuge currently, and he has quite the background in advocating for wild horses and public lands. Scott is a lifelong student and admirer of horses and all equines, and he grew up with horses on his family's farm and spent a lot of his childhood and youth on horseback in the mountains of Idaho. He got his bachelor's at Utah State University and his JD from the University of Utah, where he worked as an attorney in private practice for 17 years on the Central Oregon coast before going to work full-time in the animal protection sector as a legislative lobbyist, agriculture policy director, and equine welfare specialist. So this person has a lot of expertise and a lot to share with us today. I'm not going to get too long in the tooth. I'm sure that Scott has a lot more to say. And so without too much further ado, I'm going to welcome Scott. But first, I just want to remind everyone of etiquette for each presentation. We welcome comments and questions. After Scott is done with his presentation, we'll have a Q&A. So go ahead and start writing your questions in the chat. As you submit your questions in chat, just make sure that you are setting your little chat system to everyone in the chat, just as opposed to sending a question directly to me or to Chris or to Scott. That way everyone can see it. And as I and Chris and Heather are supporting on moderation, we can capture your question. And I just want to remind everyone to please be respectful with your questions and comments. And let's also keep comments and questions to the conversation at hand. We are all here to be supportive, and I'm sure that we can connect offline on other topics going forward. So without further ado, Scott, I'm going to hand it back to you. So whenever you're ready to share your screen, you should be able to. And if you need help from me, just let me know, and I'm going to go on mute. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jen, and a huge thank you to you and Chris and everyone involved in putting together this amazing summit. I was just reviewing again this morning the roster of speakers and experts, and wow, what an amazing team of advocates that you've put together. And you know, the objective, of course, is to uh, give all of us additional information and help us become more effective advocates for the wild horses. So I'm absolutely delighted and very much honored to be here. As Jen said, my name is Scott Beckstead. I'm coming to you from the Wild Horse Refuge in northwestern Colorado, where we are finally, I think, over the next few days going to start thawing out. It's been a pretty brutal couple of weeks with our lows down in like, you know, the 20 below range and our highs in the single digits. What's so amazing to me is that while I'm out here freezing my nunnies off, I go out there onto the range and it's bitter cold and the horses are just going about their business, acting like it's no big deal, hanging out with the mule deer who also act like it's no big deal, that it's like subarctic conditions. So anyway, the horses are doing great, but I think they probably will welcome a few days of warmer weather. So having said all that, let's get into the Wild Horse Refuge and what we're doing here. And again, thank you very much for joining and participating. Okay. So as I said, coming to you from the Wild Horse Refuge, these are two of the beautiful ponies that live here. All right, let's get started.
Scott, just a quick mention. I cannot see your presentation yet.
You can't see my presentation?
I cannot see your presentation yet. Can somebody throw a yes, we can see it, or you can? Okay, great. Other people can see it, so perhaps it's just me.
Yeah, it says that I'm getting the little notification you are screen sharing. So
okay, great. Okay, go for it.
It's probably something you're doing, Jen.
That's very likely.
Okay, start again.
Okay, go for it.
We're not hearing anything. I don't know if we're supposed to.
Not hearing?
No,
All
we're
right,
not.
let me go back out and I'll try again. Hold on.
Scott, when you screen share again, before you select that screen, as you hit the share button on the right-hand side, there should be a little checkbox for sound.
Thank you. I had failed to do that, so I apologize. Okay, try it again. Third time's a charm.
There are tales only the wild ones can tell, of a spirit unbroken, untamed, wild, free. At home in the most rugged terrain, knowing no boundary. For speed, strength, and room to run are the only things that matter. Oh, the spirit of the wild boils hot in these veins. Yet it seems as the world gets a bit more crowded, a bit more busy, a bit more covered in concrete and fence, there seems to be less and less wilderness for these wild ones. The ones who call Colorado's roughest spaces home. So they found their freedom fenced up, hemmed in by bars, rounded up and corralled, their spirit bound tight by no choice of their own. Until today. This, a wild, wild space for the wildest and most free spirits on this earth. Every inch, every acre, every mile, untamed, unfenced, untouched, theirs alone. Moving as the wind guides them, following instinctive paths carved through these canyons and grasslands thousands of years old. Stretching far to the horizon, a place to reclaim their birthright and regain their freedom. It's time for them to regain their freedom.
So that is a nice, beautiful encapsulation of what we're trying to accomplish. Again, I'm Scott Beckstead. I'm the Chief Equine Programs Director for the Wild Animal Sanctuary, but you can also just call me the horse guy for the Wild Animal Sanctuary. So we have horses living on all three of the sanctuary facilities, and it's my job to oversee how they are managed, how they're cared for, and of course to promote the mission of this organization in protecting and preserving all equines. But this is really the guy who deserves the credit for his incredible vision and his leadership. Pat Craig, comes from a pretty humble beginning. He was born and raised on a small farm outside of Boulder, Colorado. Early in life, he developed a keen awareness of the need for homes for captive carnivores that were being kept in inhumane or neglectful conditions. And so as a young man, he started planning and creating a space for these animals. He has an amazing way with every creature he comes in contact with. And he's probably the most hands-on, can-do guy I've ever met, whether it's setting up the world's largest wild horse sanctuary or fixing the starter motor on a tractor. He can do it all. So he's really a remarkable person. And after I get through with my presentations and when I get through talking to people, they're always like, we want to meet Pat. And so someday I hope he will join us in a presentation like this. But Pat is the founder and executive director of the Wild Animal Sanctuary. And it's through his vision and his leadership that he has been able to provide not just peace and freedom, but real habitat for so many animals, from bears and lions and tigers to Mustangs and so many more. So this is the guy that deserves all the credit for the good work that's being done. So the Wild Animal Sanctuary is both an organization and a place. The Wild Animal Sanctuary is the name of the nonprofit organization funded entirely by donations. And the Wild Animal Sanctuary, the place, is headquartered in Keensburg, Colorado, and it is home to many of the large carnivore animals that Pat has saved over the years. But it includes the organization oversees the operation of three separate sanctuary facilities, with the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Keensburg being sort of the flagship sanctuary facility.
The Wild Animal Sanctuary is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to educating people about the captive wildlife crisis throughout the world, while providing safe, large habitats for over 700 lions, tigers, bears, wolves, and many other species of carnivore, as well as for wild mustangs at our Wild Horse Refuge. The vast majority of the animals we house were confiscated from illegal and abusive situations by law enforcement agencies. Many were rescued from private homes, circuses, and even zoos that were closed down. The ultimate goal with every rescued animal is to gently introduce them to living in a large, open habitat with others of their kind. For many, their journey to freedom involves extensive medical treatment to nurse them back to health. Stepping out into their habitat is the first time they've ever felt grass or dirt underfoot, so we introduce them slowly through our innovative large habitat rehabilitation process that helps them adjust from small cage all the way to large open habitats. The Wild Animal Sanctuary provides an incredible new life for these rescued carnivores in our 3 facilities, 2 in Colorado and 1 in Texas. Our 4th facility, the Wild Horse Refuge, is home to herds of wild mustangs who roam freely through over 20,000 acres of grasslands, ponds, and epic vistas. The main facility in Keensburg is the only one open to the public and features a 1.5-mile long elevated walkway, which allows visitors to view the animals without disturbing them in any way. Big is the name of the game around these parts, and the sanctuary features over 30,000 acres of land available for habitats. That's over 46 square miles. Many of the individual animal habitats are larger than most zoos. For example, the world-renowned San Diego Zoo has over 100 acres of total land, whereas one single habitat at the refuge is over 250 acres in size. Put simply, the Wild Animal Sanctuary exists to eliminate the captive wildlife crisis and to create a magnificent home to rescued animals, where they can live out their lives in peace and freedom.
So some of the information in that video is actually outdated. So the facility in Boyd, Texas was actually closed, and all of those animals were moved to the facilities in Colorado. And the acreage in that video has expanded quite substantially. But the organization has been in operation for 45 years. We just had our 45-year sort of gala event last year. It's home now to over 1,000 lions, tigers, bears, wolves, and mustangs, and is the largest animal sanctuary in the world. And I just want you to just imagine the kind of rescue operations that this organization undertakes. For example, when the Russians invaded Ukraine and were bombing the port at Odessa, Ukraine, the zoo was obviously in a desperate situation. So Pat Craig organized a rescue and went into the zoo in Odessa during the Russian bombing and removed all of the large carnivores and brought them to Colorado. Similarly, when there was a large flood in Puerto Rico, you guys may remember that, the Puerto Rico Zoo was underwater and in desperate conditions. And Pat organized a rescue. They went down there, they pulled every single animal out of that zoo, found good homes for all of them, and brought the large carnivores here to Colorado to live. And it's not just, as I said, it's not just a matter of getting the animals out of bad situations and then putting them in a sanctuary. The goal is really to provide them with habitats so that for the first time in their lives, for many of these animals, especially the carnivores, they are going to experience for the first time what it's like to actually look out and see space as far as they can see and wander and play and do all the things that they were made to do. So it goes beyond just providing sanctuary. It's trying to provide habitat and as natural a life as possible for these animals. So we do now have these 3 facilities, the 1,450-acre sanctuary in Keansburg outside of Denver. That's the Wild Animal Sanctuary. 10,000-acre refuge, the Wild Animal Refuge down in southeastern Colorado near Springfield. And of course, the Wild Horse Refuge outside of Craig, Colorado, which now stands at over 28,000 acres. So this is what the Wild Animal Sanctuary looks like. And I recommend, if you're ever in Denver and you haven't already been, make the trip to Keansburg. It's about 30 to 45-minute drive. And go on that tour where you walk along the elevated walkway and you see these animals living in these big spacious habitats. The bears love to swim and play in their water. The lions, of course, love to sleep. But seeing tigers romp through the grass and wrestle each other, it's an amazing experience. And it's especially if you have kids, kids just light up over this stuff because they are seeing these animals. The animals are not disturbed by humans up on a platform. It's like they don't even know that they're there. They just go about their business, and it's a remarkable place. So highly recommend. So how does the Wild Animal Sanctuary help horses? Well, we've got our 2 facilities, the Wild Horse Refuge and the Wild Animal Refuge, both provide open, free-roaming habitats to wild horses. Here at the Wild Horse Refuge, we are home to Colorado-born horses only. So most of our horses come from the Sandwash Basin, horses that were rounded up and eventually made their way through the Bureau of Land Management to live their lives out here. But we have horses from other Colorado herd management areas as well. And then the Wild Animal Refuge down in the southeastern part of Colorado, that's a 10,000-acre facility, and over 7,000 of those acres is provided for the wild horses, with the balance being made available to the large carnivores. This is just what the property down at the Wild Animal Refuge looks like. It is so beautiful. It blows your mind because there are these really interesting geological formations, canyons and cliffs and rocky outcroppings. And as you're driving through it, you look up on a cliff and you realize that there's a grizzly up there watching you as you go by. And I remember one of the most amazing experience was driving along a fence line with Pat and being joined by a wolf who galloped alongside our vehicle for hundreds of yards. And that just gave me a sense of just how vast of a space these animals get to enjoy. Seeing that wolf galloping alongside, enjoying his freedom and enjoying the opportunity to run was remarkable. This is another shot of the Wild Animal Refuge. As you can see, it's vast. It's 10,000 acres. So if you think about a big square representing the property of the Wild Animal Refuge, and then put a smaller square inside, the smaller square is the habitats for the large carnivores, and then the horses get all of that outside acreage, which so they're enjoying about 3 times as much space, and the horses that are living down there, they come from other states. A large number of our horses are members of the alpine herd from the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona. The U.S. Forest Service considered them to be trespassing livestock, and so just rounded them up. And they were very much at risk of landing in the wrong hands and possibly in the slaughter pipeline. And so we agreed to take a number of those horses, and then a group of 19 Mustangs that landed in the Stroud Kill Pen in Oklahoma also made their way to the Wild Animal Refuge. And all of these animals are living together. And they get the free run of 7,500 acres, and that's as much space as they need. And right now we are at capacity at the Wild Animal Refuge in terms of horses. Again, as time goes on, and obviously these animals are going to live out their lives there, but as additional space becomes available, we will be taking in more. Right now, the population of horses at the Wild Animal Refuge is right at 130 horses. And then there's the Wild Horse Refuge up here in Craig, Colorado, and it's an amazing place. You just to wrap your head around how vast it is. But we specialize here in at the Wild Horse Refuge in taking Colorado-born horses, and these horses, that Pinto stallion on the left is Michelangelo. He is the grandson of the legendary Sandwash Basin stallion Picasso, and that is his lovely band of ladies that he leads. And so the majority of the horses living here are from the Sandwash Basin, but we have horses from other HMAs. And right now, the population of horses at the Wild Horse Refuge stands at 220. And what does 28,000 acres look like? It's literally, you can look from that horizon to that horizon, and you're only seeing a small portion of this refuge property. And very often when we go out to check on the horses, this is as close as we get. Often they are so far away. We were up working on a water hole up on a ridge line, and we had to get binoculars and glass the hillsides, and the closest horses we could find were 3 miles away. So they have just tons and tons of space. This is a map of the Wild Horse Refuge property. And if you can see my cursor here, this piece right here, down here below that X, that is 600 acres that was just purchased. And that is where the house is, where we are living. And then we are set to close on an additional 4,000 acres up in the the area northeast of this property, these property boundaries that you can see here. Now, if you look at this map, you see little pieces of yellow property, and those are parcels that are owned by the Bureau of Land Management. So when the Homestead Act was passed back in the mid-1850s, that was a law that encouraged people to move westward and settle the western United States. And settlers were given basically 160 acres of land, just given by the federal government, to work with and manage. And, for some of those settlers, those early pioneers, it didn't pan out. And so they literally just abandoned their property. And when that happened, those little pieces of property title reverted back to the federal government. And so that is now owned and operated by the Bureau of Land Management. So we have grazing allotments on those pieces of BLM property so that our horses can graze freely across both the personally or the privately owned property as well as the BLM lands. So we do have a close working relationship with the Bureau of Land Management. We work on the land side to manage the pieces of BLM property, and then we work on the horse side to cooperate with the BLM in accepting Colorado horses that are perhaps at risk, bringing them to the refuge to live out their lives. About 85% of the horses here at the Wild Horse Refuge come directly from the BLM after they've been removed from their herd management areas. And then the remaining 15% are from private individuals who have surrendered them to us because, the horse couldn't be worked with or the animal was unsuitable as a companion or a riding animal. And so if the animal was born here in Colorado, and came from a wild horse herd management area, we will accept those horses. But again, our population currently stands at 220. So this is our newest resident, and if you've been following my Wild Horse Wednesday videos, you've seen that I've made a few videos about her. Her name is Datatse, and she was rounded up in 2021 from the Sandwash Basin. And just last year, we got word that she had landed in a kill pen in Tennessee. She was unhandled. She was very, very thin. And she did not want to be anywhere near people. Very, very fearful. So we agreed to take her, and we reached out to the amazing advocates of the Sandwash Wild Horse Advocate Team, and they take a lead role along with Wild Horse Warriors. And you're going to meet Cindy here in a few minutes from Wild Horse Warriors on helping to preserve and protect the horses of the Sandwash Basin. And so the Sandwash Wild Horse Advocate Team, or SWAT as they are known as, they actually arranged to bail Datatse out of that kill pen. They found a rescue in Oklahoma where she could be quarantined for 30 days, and then they paid to transport her here to the Wild Horse Refuge. She is currently in our big corrals with our saddle horses, and I'm just pouring as many calories as I can into her to get her fattened up and get her to a healthy weight. She will then be turned out into a transitional pasture that we call the 180. It's a 180-acre hayfield with extremely good grass. And so that's sort of a transitional pasture to get them used to being back out onto great big open areas. And then, and there are other Sandwash Basin horses there that I know that she will recognize and she'll get reacquainted with. And then they will all be turned out, her among them, out onto the 28,000 acres to live wild and free for the rest of her life. But she's an absolute sweetheart, and she may look a little rough right there because of her shaggy winter coat, but I can tell you that when this horse trots, she has that kind of Iberian profile that she looks like she has like Andalusian or maybe Lusitano in her. And when she trots, her tail goes up and she floats, and it is the most beautiful thing. So anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun turning Datatse out into the big pastures and watch her meet up with horses that she hasn't seen for years. So what are these herd management areas? I know this may be pretty basic for most of you, but the Bureau of Land Management manages wild horses and burros on wild horse herd management areas across 10 western states on federal public lands. And each HMA is unique in terms of its terrain, the area where it is, and the herds are very, very distinct. I mean, so the horses on the Sandwash Basin HMA look very different, for example, from the horses on the Pine Nut HMA outside of Carson City, Nevada, which look very different from those great big, heavy, muscular, curly Mustangs at the Salt Wells Creek HMA in southern Wyoming. So these HMAs are really gifts, and I know we all are working very hard to try and preserve the uniqueness of these horses and all of the HMAs that they inhabit. So Colorado has 4 HMAs established by the Bureau of Land Management. And so the first one, the Little Book Cliffs Wild Horse Area HMA, Cindy, who will join us in just a minute, corrected me and said that's actually a horse area. And it is. It's not technically an HMA, but when you go to the BLM's website, they call it the Little Book Cliffs Wild Horse Area HMA. So I think they might be confused, but we're not. But we also have horses here from the Piceance East Douglas herd, the Sandwash Basin herd, which is probably the majority of our horses, and of course the Springs Creek Basin HMA. We are also home to a remarkable family of horses from the Mesa Verde National Park in southwestern Colorado. This is a beautiful picture, but I wish I could give you a better photo of this family of horses. Most of them are that dun or buckskin color, and unlike the Bureau of Land Management or the Forest Service, the National Park Service considers wild horses to be trespassing livestock. So we agreed to accept this family of horses from the national park. They do not do what the BLM does in terms of, gelding the stallions and freeze branding them. They just basically say, here you go. here you go. This family came in very, very wild. They are still very, very wild, but they are in a smaller pasture that is close to the barn area and the corrals. And the reason for that is that the daddy stallion did his work, and before they came to us, and so his ladies are all pregnant, and we have at least 3 of these mares that are pregnant and getting more and more pregnant. I'm wondering if we're going to have snow babies, but that's why we're keeping them in, so that we can make sure that those foals get the best chance possible when they're born. Once the foals are old enough, that whole family is going to be turned out, and they will probably be the first family on the eastern part of the property. And I want to just go back and show you this map. So right now, we only have horses occupying the western or left part of that property, of this property. So we are only occupying less than half of the refuge. What we have in store for this summer is we are going to replace all of the fencing on the perimeter of that east side, which is the right-hand side of the property, and so that it's ready to receive horses. But right now, with 220 horses, we're only occupying half of the refuge property. By next summer, we hope to have horses on the full 28,000 acres. So the plight of Colorado wild horses really came to bear. You remember 2021 was when the BLM started on its aggressive roundup campaign, and that included the roundup of horses at the Sandwash Basin. And a lot of people, especially in Colorado, became aware of the need to find a better way for the horses of Colorado, the wild horses of Colorado. And there was a real popular push among the people of Colorado to try and forge a new path. So, prompted by the governor, who is very much a fan and a friend of wild horses, we immediately, Pat decided that there needed to be a place for these animals where they could come in from the roundups and be turned back out to live their lives wild and free. Over the next 14 months after that roundup, Pat and his team started looking at large ranches all over Colorado that would be appropriate for a wild horse sanctuary or a refuge. And then finally found the property where we currently are. Right now, as I've said, it stands at 28,000 acres. We are just 30 minutes from the Sandwash Basin, so we're very close. This feels very much like home for these horses, especially for the horses from the Sandwash Basin. This is the same climate, the same topography, so it very much feels like a homecoming for them. And on this refuge, we are also fortunate to have lots of water. There are multiple water tanks, wells, and pumps all over the property so that the horses have easy access to fresh water, but also forage. There is abundant grass, wide open basins and valleys and hillsides that are just nothing but grass that, when the horses are out there in the spring, they're standing in grass up to their bellies. The property was purchased in January of 2023, and the first set of horses were released. As I said, we are very close to the Sandwash Basin wild horse herd management area. I was introduced to the Sandwash Basin by Cindy Wright, who gave me my first ever tour. We had a marvelous time out there. I was blown away at just the expanse of the basin and the habitat that these horses have. And I felt like I wanted to show this particular horse because someone named him Scotty. And while Cindy maintains that he was not named after me, I choose to believe otherwise. But he is, as you can see, a gorgeous gruya colored stallion emerging from one of the water holes there. This is another stallion who we saw with a band, and he's got that distinctive Picasso pinto coat. But we work very closely, especially with two wild horse nonprofits here in Colorado, the Wild Horse Warriors, who is led by Cindy Wright, and the Sandwash Wild Horse Advocates, or SWAT team, led by Stella Trueblood. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, because Colorado, after that roundup in 21, Colorado decided that it was going to explore a new path for the management of the wild horses here. And the legislature passed a bill to preserve and sort of celebrate the wild horses of Colorado. But part of that legislative project was creating the Colorado Wild Horse Working Group, which Cindy Wright sits on. So Cindy, I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to you and let you explain sort of what approach Colorado has taken. You're on mute, Cindy.
All right, thank you. They had to unmute me. So thank you, Scott, for the introduction, and thank you all for allowing me to come in and talk about the Colorado wild horses and the new innovative ideas that are coming out of the horrific gather of 2021. As Scott said, we've got the 3 herd management areas and the 1 wild horse range or herd management area. I guess they've got it both ways on the BLM site. But right now, all of the herd management areas, except for peons, are at approximately at our appropriate management level. And if they continue with the gather in 2025 that's scheduled, they are expecting peons to be at their appropriate management level. So we're hoping that in Colorado within the next year or so, we won't have any more of these really big gathers. But in the meantime, many of us went to the state and asked the state if there's any way the state could help the BLM. And in the spring of 2023, Governor Polis signed the Colorado Wild Horse Project, Senate Bill 23-275. This bill created the Wild Horse Working Group. The objective of the working group is to look for long-term solutions for Colorado wild horses that are removed from federal horse management areas, the wild horse range, or held in federal facilities, and recommend ways for the state to work with the Colorado Bureau of Land Management to support healthy wild horses on healthy land, while also acknowledging that the wild horses are federal and the state can only support the wild horses with funds, personnel, and equipment that is approved by the Bureau of Land Management. The Colorado Department of Agriculture was given $1.5 million to fund the Colorado Wild Horse Working Group. Of that, $500,000 was allocated to support fertility control and research, and $500,000 was allocated to range improvements. In Sandwash Basin, we took our $100,000 and we made major improvements to three of our main water sources. So it was a huge influx of funds for us to be able to help with the infrastructure in Sandwich Basin. The Colorado Wild Horse Working Group consists of 21 members plus the support staff. And we all come from very diverse backgrounds. And it was interesting, our first few meetings, we weren't quite sure how we were all going to work together because we had some very different ideas. But we did, and we've come up with some incredible recommendations. And some of the things we couldn't do was request changes to the gather schedule, changes to appropriate management levels, or ask for changes in the grazing permits. So the things that are federally controlled, we couldn't deal with. We could only deal with things that Colorado could help the Colorado Bureau of Land Management with, which basically is funding and support with personnel. Our focus is on what we can do to reduce the growth rate of the wild horses with fertility control, help promote adoptions while using any innovative ways to match wild horses and prospective adopters to ensure a more successful adoption, educate the public on wild horses, and support the existing sanctuaries or a possibility of creating a new state sanctuary. Over the last 15 months, there have been numerous working group meetings and committee meetings. This included the group visiting 2 of the herd management areas and the wild horse range in Colorado. Due to the weather, we were not able to go to Sandwich Basin. We actually scheduled Sandwich Basin twice, and we're not able to get there either time because of the weather. But we did visit the Wild Horse Refuge and Steadfast Steeds. During these meetings, the lid was taken off the toolbox, and the brainstorming, the conversations were amazing. The ideas were very innovative with a lot of thought given to them. By the late summer of 2024, we needed to solidify our recommendations and put it in a presentation for the state. And we had to go through the list of ideas that we had come together with and decide which ones we felt like we could get into a place of completion so that we could give them to the state for the recommendations, and those that we were not ready to make recommendations on, we put on the burner, and those are the things that we will be discussing this year. Unfortunately, Colorado's running at a deficit with funds, and the working group will be over in April. We have not heard from the state yet whether they're going to implement any of our recommendations, but I do think that the recommendations are very important, and I certainly hope that they will. All of our recommendations in their entirety are on the Colorado Department of Agriculture site. You can just type in wild horse and it'll pull up all the information. It'll pull up the bill and all of our minutes, and it'll pull up a list of all the members of the committee also. The first recommendation was to establish a program within the Colorado Department of Agriculture with a 5-year sunset review that would work with the BLM, Colorado Department of Corrections, and our other partners to promote and support non-lethal care management and the adoption of the wild horses. This could and should include providing funds for staff to help support the fertility control, which will and should include continued research. There's some incredible programs out there on AI facial recognition of wild horses, and some remote darting stations, which either one of those would make darting the birth control process much easier in multiple ways. There's still a lot to learn on those, but we're actually hoping to have a remote darting station set up at least one of the herd management areas for this spring. Not sure it's going to happen, but that's our hopes. The funds would also help with adoption events, with promotions, advertising, possible funding through grants for existing sanctuaries to take care of emergency vet care, maybe help with hay costs when hay goes from $100 a bale or a ton to $300 a ton. Research funding to support the wild horses, supporting the wild horse education, purchase equipment for joint use. So equipment could be moved from one horse sanctuary or one horse refuge to another as needed. And it would include things like a tilt chute. Develop a program to help match prospective adopters to the wild horses. And this is hopefully to help make each adoption more successful and to help develop training programs. The second recommendation is for the state to establish a wild horse advisory board to advise the Colorado Department of Agriculture regarding wild horse adoptions, education, training, and training certification in Colorado. This would also have a 5-year sunset review. The board could supply the Colorado Department of Agriculture with advice on educational content and materials, ways to support the new adopters while ensuring the health of the wild horse and the success of the adoption, financial support or materials for sanctuaries, preserves, and refuges in Colorado. Again, all of these in all their detail are listed on the Colorado Department of Agriculture's website, along with summaries of all of our meetings. Our next working group meeting is February 6th and 7th. It's in Glenwood Springs. It's open to the public, and you can register at the Colorado Department of Ag site, and you can join via Zoom. You can't participate, but you can do like you're doing here and ask questions. And then hopefully some of those questions will be answered. It is incredibly exciting to be involved in the wild horses right now with this Senate bill in Colorado and with Pat Craig and the Wild Horse Refuge and all of the innovative ideas that are coming around. I really believe Colorado is on the cusp of making some incredible changes in the management of the Colorado wild horses with the cooperation and working with the Colorado State Bureau of Land Management. And we're really hoping that these changes will lay a foundation for national changes. I do think that, we are in that place with the wild horses that we all really have to come together and help support each other and come up with some doable solutions to keep our wild horses safe. So thank you. Again, go on to the Colorado Department of Ag site and you can get a whole lot more details, but hopefully I've given you a fairly good summary, and thanks again for taking the time to listen, and hope it goes forward from the state. I think Scott's still muted.
Thank you so much, Cindy. As you can see, it's there's a lot going on here in Colorado, and as Cindy said, there's a lot of thinking outside the box. And what impressed me the most when I attended these working group meetings was, despite the the many different viewpoints and perspectives and values and ideas of all the various stakeholders, I can honestly say that everyone, including officials from the BLM in those meetings, all expressed genuine concern for the horses and a genuine desire to do right by them. And, as someone who has been in the advocacy space for wild horses for so many years, it was really gratifying to see that. Okay. So today we have more than 200. We have 220 horses right now living wild and free at the Wild Horse Refuge. As I said, the horses that live here are accustomed to thriving in the conditions here. I go out every day, in this frigid weather. I go out during blinding snowstorms, and the horses are just fat and in great condition and absolutely thriving out there on the rangeland. They will only know peace and freedom for their entire lives. That is the whole point. And what we want to do is provide these horses with a permanent home in a natural free roaming environment, and educate the American public about these amazing creatures and what they need and what they deserve, and just celebrate the horse. First of all, the horses of Colorado, but more broadly to celebrate horses and the indispensable role that they have played both in the history of our nation as well as the history of humanity. And as a general rule, we leave these horses alone. We try not to interfere with their daily lives. We go out there, of course, to make sure that they are all healthy and thriving and doing fine. But for the most part, we just let them be and let them do their thing and let them form their own friendships, their own family bands, and so forth. So it's a remarkable thing to see these animals living in that kind of free, wild existence. We do respect every single one of these horses as individuals, and we leave it to them to form their own bonds amongst each other. But it's not just the wild horses that call the Wild Horse Refuge home. And I just want to show you just a few of the many animals, the native wildlife that I encounter all day, every day when I'm out there with the horses. We have bald eagles, we have elk, we have badgers, we have the white-tailed jackrabbit, the magpie, and probably the one creature that blows my mind the most are the golden eagles. We have a bunch of them. Yesterday, I think I saw a total of 8, and these things are huge. Like if you went out there with your little kids, you'd want to keep them close because they are big. And because we have an abundance of small mammals like the rabbits, the jackrabbits, and lots of prairie dogs, all of the predatory species are very well fed. We have loads of mule deer. We have lots of prairie dogs. We have songbirds of every kind. We have seen mountain lion tracks, but we've never actually seen a mountain lion since the facility was open. We do get people that say, well, aren't you worried about an apex predator like a lion preying on the horses? And it's not a concern, and I'll tell you why. Because we have so many mule deer, so many elk, and so many pronghorn and jackrabbits, and so many other smaller, easier species that if a lion were to take up residence on the Wild Horse Refuge, they would have abundant prey from native prey sources, and they're not going to put themselves at risk trying to take down a 1,000-pound wild horse when there are so many other easier prey available. We have, as I said, we have lots of pronghorn, we have ravens, we have bobcats, and that bird on the right, that is the greater sage grouse. The sage grouse is imperiled throughout its range across the western United States, but we have abundant sage grouse on the Wild Horse Refuge. They are thriving, they are everywhere, and in fact, we have the largest breeding lac, which is a breeding territory on the Wild Horse Refuge for the greater sage grouse than anywhere else in Colorado. So this is really, proof that that wild horses do and can coexist with other native species, other wild species. I've never seen the wild horses, outcompete or bully or do any of the things to the wild species here that they are often accused of. It's just wild animals living together in harmony. So in that sense, this is truly a rewilding project. What we are trying to do is restore the ecosystem here and make sure that all of the creatures that belong here live in balance and harmony. This is another interesting feature. We have the ruins of the old 1800 Stagecoach and Pony Express stations right here on the Wild Horse Refuge. That badge in the middle was actually dug up inside the ruins. So that interesting history, and throughout the refuge property, there are ruins from the original settlers who first arrived here. What does the future look like? We are definitely in growth mode, not just at the Wild Horse Refuge, but at the other facilities as well. We are, as I said earlier, we are in the process of closing on an additional 4,000 acres that will allow us to take in even more horses. We are working to expand the facility down in southeastern Colorado, so we can hopefully take more horses there. And we've recently invested in a 30,000 square foot barn with an extensive corral system. And we are in conversations with the Bureau of Land Management to become a place so that when the BLM does these more targeted, smaller roundups, instead of taking those horses down all the way down to Canyon City and putting them in those corrals down there, they would come directly to the Wild Horse Refuge. The horses that are suitable for adoption and training would be made available to suitable homes. And the ones that are not suitable for companionship or for riding, they go out onto the refuge and they become permanent residents here. We're especially concerned about the sale authority horses that the BLM has. Those are the horses that are typically older, that have been passed over in previous adoption events, because those are the horses that can be adopted for just, or not even adopted, sold for just $25 a piece. And we are especially concerned with making sure that those horses don't fall into the wrong hands and instead come to live out their years at the Wild Horse Refuge. So please consider supporting our work. This is my shameless plug for support from all of you. We do depend entirely on private donations to operate. And we have a program where you can donate. You can become a founding donor by donating the equivalent purchase price of 1 acre of our land, which is $777. And that entitles you to a VIP tour pretty much whenever you want of the refuge. You get a newsletter giving you updated information on how things are going at the refuge, some awesome merchandise and so forth. So please consider becoming a donor. And that's all I've got. And I appreciate all of you coming and joining and learning more about our work.
Scott, thank you so much. And Cindy, you as well. What a great presentation. And also, we have so many questions. So are you feeling good about answering some and having a conversation?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
great.
Jen, can I just jump in for a minute?
Yes.
I have to leave in a little bit to go do another presentation. Chad Hanses is starting soon, but you guys can stay and talk as long as you want. Really great presentation, and I appreciate you guys being here, especially you, Cindy. I want everyone to know that in North Dakota, we are currently working to get Senate Bill 2331 passed, and that calls for the formation of a working group similar to what you guys did in Colorado here in North Dakota to help manage the wild horses in Theodore Roosevelt National Park with the National Park Service. So that goes into committee next Friday. We do have a link on our website for everyone to go and please testify in support of this. It is something modeled after what you guys have done in Colorado. And I also want to add that before Doug Burgum left the governor's office here in North Dakota, we did go to his office and share this information with them. And we talked about what you guys had done in Colorado also and how we wanted to model that here. And as everyone, I hope, knows, Governor Burgum was very supportive of the Theodore Roosevelt National Park wild horses and really offered any resources we have within the state. So he was very much in favor of this. And before he left office, he did talk to a local news reporter and specifically talked about what was happening in Colorado as hopefully an innovative approach that he will take with him to the DOI, as he was just confirmed yesterday as Secretary of the Interior. So I'm hopeful for that. And I'm glad that I did bring that to their attention. But I also want everyone to know that what happened in Colorado is very innovative. So thank you again. And thank you, Cindy, for being a part of that. And also you have a way to have a voice. And if you go to our website, chwha.org, there's a blog today that talks about it's time to testify and how to do that. So thank you guys again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so I'm going to piggyback off what Chris was just talking about. to an extent. So Laura is asking, how can other states implement this model of the wild horse refuge?
Cindy, do you want to take that one? Make sure and unmute Cindy.
Thank you. I think it was more directed for you, Scott, because it was about the Wild Horse Refuge, but I think it's really getting the support of our local, state representatives, the county commissioners, the area where you're at, and taking it all the way up to the state and really work with the BLM. It's really got to be that partnership. It's about working with the entities that are already there and not fighting them, and knowing where there are some limits, because in Colorado, we can't change the federal law. But if we can change things in Colorado and show them that these changes will make a difference, just like what Chris is saying, maybe it'll go on up to Theodore Roosevelt National Monument Park. And I know there's another group down in, I think it's New Mexico, working on something similar to this. So maybe all of those joint efforts can go forward up to federal, and we can actually start seeing some real changes.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so we do have a lot of questions to get through, so bear with me. So just going back to the refuge, we had a couple of questions about rewilding, exactly what that means as far as breeding, and then some questions on fertility control. So in general, curious, what sort of fertility control is being applied, if any, to the horses on the refuge? I think there was a question, Kim wants to know if you're rewilding but not breeding. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a question that we get a lot of. The horses that we are accepting are overwhelmingly from the Bureau of Land Management that have been rounded up by the BLM. And when they bring those horses in, all of the stallions are gelded, all of the colts and all of the stallions are gelded. So we do not have reproducing herds here. That's the one part of the refuge that would not be considered completely natural. These are not reproducing horses. Of course, that's also important because we want to make sure that we are a refuge, not just for the wild horses, but with all those other species that they share the range with. No reproduction. All of the male horses are sterilized.
Thank you. Okay, and then, so this is going to be related. We have some questions about fencing. So, is the refuge fenced off? Also, what happens if horses fall out of their BLM allotments and onto, has that ever happened where they migrate off? What
No,
happens there?
the horses can move freely on and off those little pieces of BLM land. And we have a variety of different kinds of fencing. So the perimeter fencing that goes around the boundary of the property, that is a standard 5-strand barbed wire fence that is designed not just to keep the horses in, but it's also important to keep cattle and sheep from trespassing onto the wild horse refuge. It also needs to be constructed in a way that allows for the migration of elk and mule deer, who need to be able to jump over the fence. And then the pronghorn also need to be able to move freely, and pronghorn prefer to crawl under the fence like a dog or cat would. So that bottom strand has to be like 18 inches off the ground. So we have constructed the perimeter fencing to keep the horses in, but to keep the cattle and sheep out, and to facilitate the movement of wild species. The wild horses here don't challenge the fences, though. That's the thing, is that they have so much room, so much forage, so much water, that there's really no need for them even to try and test the fences. So we've been very fortunate, but we also have like that 180-acre transitional pasture that I told you about, that hayfield that we call the 180. that has a welded 6-foot tall fence around it, because that's where horses that we adopted from the BLM go for that first year when they are untitled. So the BLM requires adopters who do go through the adoption process to confine the adopted horses in according to certain standards, and fences have to be like 6 feet high and so forth. So horses that we have that we do not yet have title from the BLM are kept in that 180 acre transitional pasture with a very, very strong welded pipe fence. And that's where they stay. And then once we get title from the BLM, then they are free to go out and join the rest of the herd.
Awesome. Okay, and then another question. Ellen wants to know how your relationship is with private landowners that butt up against your property.
So we have it's good. I mean, it's good. I would say that early on there was, I think there was some trepidation, wondering, what the presence of wild horses would be, how many horses would there be, and so forth. We have a lot of sheep ranches surrounding us, especially to the north and to the west, and then to the east we have a horse ranch, and this is a place where this facility leases out horses to outfitters and riding camps and things like that. And every year they have a horse drive from that ranch all the way up State Highway 40 to Maybell, where everyone comes and picks up their horses, and then those horses are brought back at the end of the summer. And it's a big tradition, and it's pretty amazing to see 400 horses trotting down a highway. They all know the drill. They know what they're doing. And, so I think they're, the issue was, were we going to somehow compete with that? And, they quickly learned that, we're not trying to compete with that. All we're trying to do is provide range for wild horses that have been removed. So our relationships with the neighbors are great.
That's great to hear. Sheila is curious. I mean, you did mention that there's great forage on the property. Did you have to feed any of the range horses this winter?
Nope. And we didn't have to feed any last winter either. We do have several large hay fields. We have abundant hay, and that 180, the pasture that we call the 180, it is sub-irrigated, which means that it is irrigated by water flowing under the ground. So it never has to be irrigated. And it just explodes with thick, dense grass that is really high quality forage. We do one cutting of hay on that 180 acres, and then it belongs to the horses for the rest of the year. But 2 years ago, there was a really bad winter, 40 inches of snow that stayed for months. If we have another winter like that, we would probably take hay out to the horses. But so far, and I'm out there every day to monitor the condition of the horses. The horses are all fat, in great condition. It's the dead of winter here, and yet they are all looking, wonderful. So far we have not had to feed.
Right. Sheila is also curious, what do you attribute your current relationship to BLM to?
Well, I think that the BLM understands what we're trying to do, and I like to think that they appreciate the fact that we are taking animals off their hands that they would otherwise have to feed or pay to feed. If you consider that, it costs an average of $50,000 to chase down a wild horse with a helicopter, confine it, and then care for it for the rest of its life. And we've got right now 220 horses on our property. You combine 220 horses times $50,000. That's real money that the taxpayers aren't having to pay. And so I think that the Bureau of Land Management understands that we are providing a really valuable service to them, to the BLM, but also to the American taxpayers who would otherwise be paying for all of these horses to be fed by private contractors.
Good. Okay, this is a great question. Mary says, would Scott have any suggestions or recommendations for advocacy besides donating to litigation funds, buying wild horse art, calling and writing for the SAFE Act, Roundup moratorium COP for advocates who live not in 10 Western states with HMA? So I think in general, what can people do where the wild horse issue isn't necessarily as active in their state?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And, it's always surprising, and it shouldn't be, but it's always surprising when I find out how many people, especially east of the Mississippi, don't even know we have wild horses. I have had so many meetings with members of Congress, and they're like, I didn't even know there were wild horses. They think when we talk about wild horses, we're talking about the horses of Assateague Island or the horses of Chincoteague Island. And it's like, so very often, people outside of the Western United States, and especially fiscally minded Republicans, love the idea that there are options that will save the taxpayers money that still celebrate and protect these iconic wild herds that we have back here. So I think, getting on a first name basis with the staff for your members of Congress, that's your United States representative and both of your United States senators, get on a first name basis with whoever handles their animal welfare portfolio or public lands portfolio, and just really start educating them about the plight of the wild horses and the fact that there are so many options available outside of costly roundups and incarceration.
Great. Okay, Nancy wants to know, do you need volunteer ambassadors?
I would say yes. We love having the help of volunteers, not just here at the Wild Horse Refuge, but at all three facilities. So if you're interested in volunteering, go to the Wild Animal Sanctuary website, which is wildanimalsanctuary.org, and find the volunteer link, and definitely join the team. Would love to have you.
That's great. I've had a couple of questions, and this will be at Cindy's comfort level. If Cindy's willing to share her email, I think we have a lot of her email address. I think we have a lot of advocates that are interested in connecting with you about the working group that you're involved in.
Sure, you're more than welcome to share it. It's just wildhorsewarriors@hotmail.com.
I'm gonna put it Wild Horse Warriors at Hotmail.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've just entered it in the chat. So if you could give that a quick look and just make sure I did that correctly. Okay, great.
Looks right. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question that I'm curious about, and then I think we are in a good place, but we can always chat longer if Scott and Cindy are interested in hanging on for longer. So my question is going to be, I've heard a lot about having great forage where you are. I've heard that you are on BLM. Some of your horses are on BLM allotments, and that you have many other species that are native to the area. So I'm curious, do you foresee utilizing the refuge model as an example for, or a study in thriving natural ecological balance? One that might counter some of BLM's rhetoric?
The answer to that question is not just yes, it is hell yes. We really are striving to become a model. I posted my Wednesday video, and someone commented, yeah, but you can't take all of the 60,000 plus horses in holding at the Wild Horse Refuge. And that is true. We can only take a tiny little fraction of the number of horses that need homes here on, even though we've got this massive piece of property, we can only take a limited number of horses because, again, we don't want to have too many horses for what the range can sustain. We don't want other species, to be sacrificed. We want this entire ecosystem to thrive. And so we do want to be a model, because we need a lot more facilities like this if we are going to if we're going to make sure that horses that are rounded up aren't falling into the wrong hands or are just, spend their lives languishing in government corrals. And so, nurturing a positive relationship with the BLM is absolutely key. I saw a question in the chat. Did the BLM said no more horses until you finish fencing? No, they haven't. They haven't said that, but they, we do have the BLM out here. We gave the Colorado BLM horse person, a very nice lady named Lene. We gave her a thorough tour, drove her all over the refuge and showed her, and she absolutely loved it. And so, and again, I'm coming from that advocate background, so readjusting my thinking in terms of working with the BLM has been a major part of me stepping into this role. But it's something that I've really enjoyed because, again, when the BLM comes out and sees what we're doing and understands our mission and how it can benefit them, it's been very, very positive.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Am I missing anyone's question? If you have a question, just in the next 30 seconds, let's say, just pop it back in to the chat. We have just such great conversation. Thank you everyone for being supportive, for being kind and respectful. This has been wonderful. Cindy, if you're still there, you are. Thank you for your time. Scott, thank you for your time. Lori does have a question. So hang on just a second, if you don't mind. Okay, Lori's saying she's got a question about a stallion that came from the U.S. Forest Service. So I know, Scott, that you did mention that. Okay, let's see.
She may be referring to the Mesa Verde National Park.
I see.
And yeah, that big daddy stallion he's remarkable. First of all, he's a hunk, a great big buckskin stallion who takes his duties very seriously. But honestly, he's not the boss. The old swayback mare, she's the boss. He does whatever she tells. They all do whatever she tells them to do. And yes, we have him, and we took two colts, male foals that are still at their mother's side, and they were we brought our veterinary team up and sedated them, and they were gelded.
Great. Thank you for answering. And thank you, Lori, for re-upping your questions so that I didn't miss it. Appreciate that. Nancy says, boss mare. Oh, yeah. So he has been gelded.
Okay,
yes. Great. Mary says, thank you, Scott. You're always a font of info. I don't understand that, but I think you are a great resource. Thank you all
I appreciate it
so much. This has been wonderful. We're proving at the very beginning of this summit that everybody's just hanging on for almost 2 hours. So we appreciate everyone taking your time. Again, being so respectful, and this has been wonderful. This presentation will be available on YouTube at chwha.org as soon as our team can get it up and running. And so again, thank you so much, and y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.